Emily, is Grandpa behaving himself? Oh, well, sort of. He hurt his leg. Old people can be such a bother sometimes. I wish they'd think about those of us who have to take care of them. Patricia, that's not a very nice thing to say. It's fine. He's getting old anyway. I just don't like dealing with all this fuss. But you're used to it, so you'll manage. The other day, my husband's grandpa Michael fell in the garden and hurt his leg. It's not a serious injury, but he's 82, so we're making him rest in bed just to be safe. My mother-in-law won't even go near him, let alone take care of him. I'm Emily, 30 years old. I got married 3 years ago and live with my husband Daniel's family. My husband used to be my boss at the company, which was started by his grandpa. When I joined 8 years ago, my father-in-law was the president, but his father, Grandpa, was still in charge of all the big decisions. 2 years ago, when Grandpa turned 80, he stepped down from most of his duties, letting my father-in-law handle things. Michael, you've worked hard. Now, let Christopher take care of the company, and you can relax, my mother-in-law said, smiling. But her words felt a bit sarcastic to me. Grandpa may be stubborn, but he's a fair and kind person, well respected. My father-in-law, on the other hand, seems a bit immature and unreliable, always doing what my mother-in-law says. My husband and I started dating while working together on the same project 3 years after I joined. He was a team leader, energetic but a little full of himself. Maybe I was drawn to him because I lost my dad early and was raised by my mom alone. My mom passed away 2 years ago, so now I only have my husband's family. After I got married, my mother fell ill, and I quit my job to take care of her. Luckily, my husband's family didn't mind, thanks to something Grandpa said. It's only natural to care for the mother who raised you. Don't worry, just take good care of her, he said. Because of Grandpa's support, I was able to be with my mom every day until she passed away. My mother-in-law seemed a little unhappy about it, but I was grateful. However, since Grandpa stepped down from the company, everyone's attitude towards him has changed. They don't really listen to him anymore, and I feel like they're treating him poorly. At first, I thought I was imagining it, but after watching my mother-in-law and husband, I can't help but think they don't respect Grandpa as they used to. My father-in-law doesn't say much, but it feels like he's ignoring Grandpa as if he's no longer needed because he's retired. Seeing how my in-laws act makes me angry. Hey, don't you think you and Patricia are being a little cold toward Grandpa? So what? What's the big deal? Grandpa tries to talk to you, but you barely respond. You don't even help him, I said. I don't have time to deal with old people. You can take care of Grandpa since you have the free time, Patricia replied. You don't have to say it like that. Quiet. I'm tired from work. Stop nagging me about things that don't matter, she snapped. No matter what I say, they won't listen. My grandfather-in-law doesn't speak up about it either, so I'm the only one who talks to him at home. Grandpa, the weather is nice today. Want to go for a little walk? Your leg seems to be healing well, and it could be good for you, I suggested. Thank you. Let's go out for a bit, he agreed. We went to the park and there were families with children playing. Grandpa watched them with joy. Christopher and Daniel used to be like that too, he said softly. Grandpa seemed sad as he continued. I was busy with work and didn't spend much time with them. Maybe that's why I didn't raise them properly. Christopher is my father-in-law and Daniel is my husband. I often think everyone should be kinder to Grandpa, but I don't know how to change things. One day, my in-laws suggested building a new house for Grandpa. This house is over 50 years old. The layout is hard to use, and instead of fixing it, we should just build a new one in a more convenient location, they said. A new house. Michael is getting older, and he only got injured last time. But we don't know what could happen next, so let's build a house that's barrier-free. It'll be easier to take care of him. I see. We can even put Grandpa's room in the middle so it's easy for everyone to help him, they added. That's a good idea. Great, it's decided. And about the cost, Michael? If it's for all of us, I'll handle it. Talk to Mr. Jones about the money. Of course, Michael, thank you. My mother-in-law smiled. I couldn't help but feel that they only act nice to Grandpa when they need money. But if moving to a new house means everyone will take care of him, maybe it's not such a bad idea. Mr. Jones is the company's lawyer and also manages Grandpa's personal finances. Grandpa has trusted him for almost 30 years. He's 58 now, and Grandpa relies on him a lot. I've met him several times, and he seems like a very honest man. He always checks on Grandpa's health, and sometimes he feels more like a son to him. Having someone like Mr. Jones around my grandfather-in-law makes me feel a bit relieved, especially since Grandpa seems to trust him more than his own sons. Even though I wasn't told where or what kind of house was being built, my mother-in-law was cheerful. The three of them, my husband, father-in-law, and mother-in-law, were looking at interior design magazines, discussing various things, so everything seemed to be going smoothly. Then something unexpected happened. It was revealed that my grandfather-in-law had a debt of $1.82 million. Wait, what's this about $1.82 million? I asked, shocked. Grandpa had co-signed a loan for a friend's company. Unfortunately, the company ran into trouble, and now the debt had become Grandpa's responsibility. Wait, are they going to take the house? It's still under construction, isn't it? The contract's already done, Patricia said, and since it's in the president's name, we're fine. My mother-in-law looked relieved. Thank goodness we did it my way. It was then I realized the house was in my father-in-law's name, even though Grandpa was paying for it. This was definitely something my mother-in-law would do. But why didn't they consider giving up the house to help repay the debt? Hey, this debt is Grandpa's problem, right? It has nothing to do with us or the company, my husband said. Yeah, it's all in Michael's name, my father-in-law confirmed. Good, then we're in the clear. I couldn't understand what was good about that, but since Grandpa stayed silent during the conversation, I didn't say anything either. It was a lot of money, far beyond anything I could manage. A few days later, Grandpa's behavior started to change. Grandpa, what would you like for lunch? I asked. Who are you calling Grandpa? I'm only 50. You have no right to call me that, he snapped. Ha! Oh, I'm sorry, Grandpa. I mean, right, you're lost in thought. At first, I thought he was just distracted, but it kept happening, and I began to feel uneasy. Patricia, what are you doing? Where's my meal? He suddenly demanded. Grandpa, I'm Emily. Patricia is your daughter-in-law. You already ate your meal earlier. I didn't eat. Are you trying to starve me? He shouted. I started wondering if Grandpa's strange behavior was triggered by the stress of the $1.82 million debt and the fact that none of his family was helping him. It must have been a double shock for him. What can I do for him? I tried to take Grandpa to the hospital, but he refused. I think he didn't want to admit that he might have dementia. I don't want to force Grandpa to anything, but I feel so helpless on my own. I consulted my husband Daniel, but his response was cold and detached. It has nothing to do with me, he said. I couldn't rely on my mother-in-law either, so I decided to speak to my father-in-law, Christopher. Yeah, Patricia told me, Christopher said. They think it might be dementia. But is it really that bad yet? I think we should go to the hospital. There are good medications that can slow it down, I replied, hoping he'd understand. Christopher hesitated. But if we go to the hospital, others will find out that my father has dementia. Let's just wait and see for a bit longer. You're here, so it'll be fine, right? I felt crushed by how unreliable they all were. No one was willing to help. Grandpa, let's go to the hospital. Please, let's get you properly checked out, I urged. But Grandpa had become suspicious and stubborn. Who are you? Where are you taking me? You're up to no good. Tears welled up in my eyes. This once kind man, my grandfather-in-law, had turned into someone unrecognizable. His confusion broke my heart. My mother-in-law, Patricia, just laughed. Even if he was the chairman, it's over for him now. Everything, even the company, belongs to Christopher now, she said with a smirk. I couldn't believe how heartless she was. Grandpa has worked hard for this family all his life. How can you say that? I shouted, anger and sadness filling my chest. Patricia dismissed my emotions with a wave. He'll forget everything soon. He'll start wandering, dribbling. It gives me chills just thinking about it. He's nothing but a nuisance now. Her words cut through me, but Grandpa only smiled faintly as if unaware of the cruelty around him. I hoped that moving to the new house, which Grandpa paid for, might change things. Maybe, once they were living in the house he built, the family would show him some gratitude. 2 months later, the house was ready. I had been forced to pack my in-laws' and husband's things, while my own belongings were mostly left untouched. Every time I tried to pack my things, they gave me more tasks, leaving me no time. On moving day, after most of their things had been moved, I went to fetch Grandpa. That's when Daniel dropped the bombshell. You and Grandpa can stay here, he said casually. What? I asked, confused. You'll stay in this house. We don't need any extra baggage in the new house. It took me a moment to grasp what he was saying. In other words, you and Grandpa will live here from now on, and I'll give you Grandpa's debt too. I was speechless. Well, you can at least be a housekeeper, he added, his tone indifferent. Then turning to his parents, he said, Hey, let's go. Yeah, I'm coming. Good luck with all the debt repayment and love and care, Christopher added with a smug grin as they all climbed into the car, leaving me and Grandpa behind. For a while, I just stood there, stunned. I couldn't understand what had just happened. They had abandoned us, both me and Grandpa. How could they be so cruel? They had taken everything, leaving us to face the debt and Grandpa's care alone. To explain this simply to my grandfather-in-law, here's what happened. I went back to the room to talk to Grandpa. I wasn't upset about taking care of him. I always intended to help him, but when I saw him, something felt different. His expression had changed, and he seemed like a different person from the man I had known just months ago. As I was about to speak, Grandpa smiled and surprised me with his next words. Soon after, Mr. Jones, one of his old business associates, arrived and called him chairman. Chairman, have you finished getting rid of the unnecessary staff? Mr. Jones asked. Yes, it's all done. Let's go, Grandpa replied confidently. Where are we going? I asked, still confused. To the new house, of course, Grandpa said. Without fully understanding, I followed him as we left the house where I had been living. A month later, I started getting countless calls from my mother-in-law and husband. Grandpa decided not to respond to them, but I answered my husband's call because we were in the middle of a divorce. Hey Emily, is Grandpa with you? I went to the old house, and it's for sale. You can't repay the debt with that money. Is that why you did this? I asked what he meant, and he demanded to speak to Grandpa. He explained that Grandpa had sold the company's stocks to the executive director, making the director the largest shareholder, which led to my father-in-law being dismissed as president. My husband was furious, thinking the executive director had tricked Grandpa, but I calmly explained, You're misunderstanding something. Grandpa doesn't have dementia. In fact, he's clearer than ever. My husband was shocked. What he didn't know was that Grandpa had been suspicious ever since my mother-in-law started planning to build the new house. So, he came up with a plan to secure his legacy, making sure the company ended up in the right hands, not theirs. My grandfather-in-law had pretended to have dementia to see how my in-laws and husband would act. Just as he suspected, they quickly showed their true colors, treating him poorly. In the end, they left both of us behind. I couldn't help but laugh a little as things unfolded exactly as Grandpa had predicted. He smiled and said, To deceive the enemy, you must first deceive your allies. Grandpa had been getting regular updates from the executive director and Mr. Jones about the company's situation. While he had handed over the company to my father-in-law, he was worried about its future. Seeing how careless and self-centered my father-in-law and husband were, he decided to take action. He couldn't trust them with the company, so he gave control to the executive director instead. As for the $1.82 million debt, it was no longer an issue. Grandpa had once been a guarantor for a friend's debt, but he also owned valuable assets. After stepping back from the company, he invested in real estate and made a lot of money. However, if I had mentioned that, my mother-in-law and husband would have targeted those assets, so I only talked about the debt. It turned out that the friend, whose debt Grandpa guaranteed, had sold land for a high price because it was being developed into a resort. So, there was no debt to worry about anymore. When my husband called, he was shocked. You're kidding. But we've both been denounced by the company. What are we supposed to do now? I calmly reminded him about the mortgage on their new house. The house was supposed to be paid for by Grandpa, but did you forget what he said? He would only pay if the house was for everyone, including me and Grandpa. Since that's not the case, Grandpa didn't pay. My husband was stunned. They had assumed Grandpa would cover everything without bothering to check the paperwork. In reality, they signed the mortgage themselves, proving they never had the qualities to run a company responsibly. Afterward, my parents-in-law ended up losing the house they had built because they couldn't pay the mortgage. Now, they live in an old apartment that's over 50 years old and are struggling to pay off the remaining debt. My mother-in-law and husband have been calling me, asking if we could all live together, but that's no longer possible. My grandfather-in-law has retired from his chairman position and bought a small house in the countryside where we now live together. He told me, Emily, you're free to live wherever you like. Don't worry about expenses. Even though I could have lived elsewhere, I chose to stay with him. When I told him that, his eyes filled with tears. Thanks to Mr. Jones, the divorce was finalized, and I managed to have my former father-in-law and husband removed from any inheritance. I became my grandfather-in-law's adopted daughter. If anything happens to my grandfather-in-law, who has now become like a father to me, I plan to take care of him for the rest of his life. These days, we enjoy working in the fields together. I look at the big radishes we grow and think about how warm and happy these moments are. I hope these peaceful days continue for as long as possible.